Hello, and welcome to The Sleep Retreat. This podcast will help you relax, unwind, and if you want to, fall asleep. If you're already familiar with the show, feel free to skip ahead to 4 minutes and 30 seconds. If you're new to using a podcast to relax or fall asleep, here is why they work. By simply listening to something other than your own racing thoughts, your mind is offered a well-deserved hiatus. It's a break from all the endless, everyday thinking and processing. And it's all delivered in the form of a moderately captivating narrative, something interesting enough to hold your mind's attention, but also gentle and bland enough to lull you to sleep. Here at the Sleep Retreat, we offer a unique and creative listener experience delivered to you in 2 seamless stages. The first stage is something we call the tuck-in. During this approximately 10-minute segment, I'll be engaging your dreamy imagination and setting you down into an immersive, serene, comfortable space, a place far, far away, perfect for dozing off. And along the way, I'll guide you with simple things you can do to further relax and prepare for pending sleep. After this stage, when we are all tucked in and comfy in this make-believe lullaby land, it's time for the next stage, the drift-off. The drift-off is when we transition together into that sleepy state of slumber. First, we are guided by the somewhat interesting, yet also delightfully monotonous narration of this week's episode, often delivered in the style of an old AM radio or other lo-fi experience. After approximately 45 minutes, the narration concludes, transitioning seamlessly into a 30-minute or longer segment featuring nothing but the continued ambient sounds from our peaceful lullaby land. These soothing background noises range from the rumble of a thunderstorm and the distant calls of seagulls to the steady hum of a car engine, all designed for continued peaceful sleep. Now, it's good to know that it's common with sleep podcasts that it might take 2 or 3 listens before your brain fully sort of trains itself to relax to this show. Once you do, though, just as children love hearing the same bedtime story over and over again, upon return here, you'll find yourself quickly feeling more relaxed and peaceful and diving towards sleep. In this first series, we will feature readings from the Warren Commission report on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Now, this might sound like an unusual choice for a bedtime story, but believe me, it works. It's a blend of intrigue and at times wonderfully dull narrative, ideal for lulling you to sleep. I should say perhaps that the first few episodes might lean a little more towards the interesting side of the equation, but as the series progresses, they get increasingly monotonous and bland, perfect for sleeping. And you can always jump ahead in the series if you would like. Other stories are coming in the future, and there are several different sleeping environments you can choose from for each episode. Try them out until you find the perfect one for you, or maybe you mix it up from day to day, depending on your mood. If you have any questions or suggestions, send an email to info@porchlightpodcast.network. Now, let's get all settled in at the Sleep Retreat. Okay, let's drift off to sleep. Today you'll be listening and dozing off on a warm afternoon at Grandma and Grandpa's at Gull Harbor. Imagine for a second that you are lying down on a warm futon mattress at one end of a screened-in porch. The porch faces the harbor, the bay, and the ocean on the horizon. The mattress is nestled into a corner and is part of a cozy little reading nook prepared just for kids. There is a little bookshelf there full of comics, magazines, crosswords, and children's books. There are new books and worn-out books. The Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, books about dinosaurs and horses and sea life, and all kinds of stories about kids getting into summer adventures together. A blue plastic and white transistor radio sits next to a stack of puzzles and board games. A wooden box contains decks of playing cards, dice, jacks, and short little pencils that have been sharpened way too many times. Now, while imagining laying here, let's get nice and relaxed. First, close your eyes and just become aware of your breathing, feeling your chest gently rise and fall again. Next, we will try taking a few deeper breaths. First, filling your lungs with air, then holding it in for 2 or 3 seconds before gently exhaling and letting it all go. Ready? Breathe in deeply, hold for 3, 2, 1, and then exhale. One more time. Breathe in deeply, hold for 3, 2, 1, and exhale. And try thinking to yourself, as I lay here at Gull Harbor, I can feel gravity's pull tugging me gently back towards Earth. With every exhale, I can feel my feet, my ankles, calves, knees, and my legs becoming heavier and more relaxed. Now you can feel the cool, salty ocean air on your skin. It would almost be too cold if it wasn't for the wonderful afternoon sun shining down on you perfectly. The sunlight splatters through the screens and bathes your tanned legs and arms with a soothing warmth, almost as if Grandma has wrapped you up like a cocoon in one of her quilted blankets. Inside the house, the TV is on, and you can hear Grandma and Grandpa moving around after lunch.
To make it difficult for quizmasters? Yes.
You know that they too will soon be taking their afternoon nap in their rooms. But you've got the whole porch to yourself, and your belly feels nice and warm and perfectly satisfied. Today, Grandma made clam chowder and grilled cheese sandwiches. You enjoyed the hot soup and warm, soft cheese, and then you washed it down with a glass of fresh, cold milk. Now, try taking a few more deep breaths. First, filling your lungs with air, holding it there briefly before gently exhaling and letting it all go. Ready? Breathe in deeply, hold for 3, 2, 1, and then exhale. Try continuing on your own, and while doing this, try thinking to yourself, as I lay here, I can feel my body becoming heavier in the cool air and warm sunshine. With each exhale, I can feel my hands and arms and my torso becoming heavier and heavier and more relaxed. You pull out a random book from the bookshelf. This one is called Summer Friends, and on the cover is a picture of a little girl in a red dress with white polka dots. She's sitting in grass with flowers all about, and she's shaking the paw of a bunny rabbit while a white duck looks on and a little frog jumps through the air. You decide that you're just too sleepy to read right now, so you set the book down and lay back and think about the day. It's no wonder you're sleepy and tired. In the morning, after breakfast, Grandma rubbed coconut-scented sunscreen on your face and arms, and then Grandpa took you with him in the old rusty truck to the hardware store. There he drank coffee and laughed with old bearded men wearing high rubber boots. Then you went with him to the docks at the harbor, where he showed you the best place to buy fresh clams, crab, and fish. The docks were bustling with activity. Wooden boats creaked against the tide, fishermen shouted to one another, and the air was thick with the scent of salt water, fresh fish, and diesel. As you continue to breathe deeply and then exhale, try thinking to yourself, as I lay here, my whole body feels heavy and relaxed. With every exhale, I can feel gravity pulling me back towards Earth gently. I can feel my head, my shoulders, my neck becoming relaxed and at ease. And my legs are heavy and at peace with gravity's pull. Now my whole body, my legs and feet, my arms and hands, my torso, my head and neck and shoulders, My whole body is completely at peace, relaxed, and at ease. In the late morning, after coming back to the house with Grandpa, you had borrowed his binoculars and walked up Whalebone Hill, where you could see everything far and wide. The little town of Gull Harbor, the fishing boats and ships at sea, the car ferry full of tourists headed to the islands, the seagulls, and kids riding bikes and scooters along the streets below. Then, up on Whalebone Hill, you had finally flown your brand new kite, a beautiful purple kite with a long white tail. It climbed higher and higher and higher through the coastal winds, tugging on your tired arms like a heavy fish on the end of the line. But now, so drowsy, laying under the sun on the porch, after a long morning of adventures in the crisp, fresh coastal air, you pick up the transistor radio and dial into a random station.
Afternoon of October 21, 1959, Oswald was ordered to leave the Soviet Union by 8 p.m. that evening. That same afternoon in his hotel room, Oswald,
and then you set the radio down, lay back, and close your eyes.
On October 31, 3 days after his release from the hospital, Oswald appeared at the American embassy, announced that he wished to renounce his U.S. citizenship and become a Russian citizen, and handed the embassy officer a written statement he had prepared for the occasion. When asked his reasons, Oswald replied, "I'm a Marxist." Oswald never formally complied with the legal steps necessary to renounce his American citizenship. The Soviet government did not grant his request for citizenship, but in January 1960, he was given permission to remain in the Soviet Union on a year-to-year basis. At the time, Oswald was sent to Minsk, where he worked in a radio factory as an unskilled laborer. In January 1961, his permission to remain in the Soviet Union was extended for another year. A few weeks later, in February 1961, he wrote to the American embassy in Moscow expressing a desire to return to the United States. The following month, Oswald met a 19-year-old Russian girl, Marina Nikolaevna Prusakova, a pharmacist who had been brought up in Leningrad, but was then living with an aunt and uncle in Minsk. They were married on April 30th, 1961. Throughout the following year, he carried on a correspondence with American and Soviet authorities seeking approval for the departure of himself and his wife to the United States. In the course of this effort, Oswald and his wife visited the U.S. Embassy in Moscow in July of 1961. Primarily on the basis of an interview and questionnaire completed there, the embassy concluded that Oswald had not lost his citizenship, a decision subsequently ratified by the Department of State in Washington, D.C. Upon their return to Minsk, Oswald and his wife filed with the Soviet authorities for permission to leave together. Their formal application was made in July 1961, and on December 25, 1961, Marina Oswald was advised it would be granted. A daughter was born to the Oswalds in February 1962. In the months that followed, they prepared for their return to the United States. On May 9, 1962, the U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service, at the request of the Department of State, agreed to waive a restriction under the law which would have prevented the issuance of a United States visa to Oswald's Russian wife until she had left the Soviet Union. They finally left Moscow on June 1st, 1962, and were assisted in meeting their travel expenses by a loan of $435.71 from the U.S. Department of State. 2 weeks later, they arrived in Fort Worth, Texas. For a few weeks, Oswald, his wife, and child lived with Oswald's brother, Robert. After a similar stay with Oswald's mother, they moved into their own apartment in early August. Oswald obtained a job on July 16th as a sheet metal worker. During this period in Fort Worth, Oswald was interviewed twice by agents of the FBI. The report of the first interview, which occurred on June 26th, described him as arrogant and unwilling to discuss the reasons why he had gone to the Soviet Union. Oswald denied that he was involved in Soviet intelligence activities and promised to advise the FBI if the Soviet representatives ever communicated with him. He was interviewed again on August 16th when he displayed a less belligerent attitude and once again agreed to inform the FBI of any attempt to enlist him in intelligence activities. In early October 1962, Oswald quit his job at the sheet metal plant and moved to Dallas. While living in Fort Worth, the Oswalds had been introduced to a group of Russian-speaking people in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Many of them assisted the Oswalds by providing small amounts of food, clothing, and household items. Oswald himself was disliked by almost all of this group, whose help to the family was prompted primarily by sympathy for Marina Oswald and the child. Despite the fact that he had left the Soviet Union disillusioned with its government, Oswald seemed more firmly committed than ever to his concepts of Marxism. He showed disdain for democracy, capitalism, and American society in general. He was highly critical of the Russian-speaking group because they seemed devoted to American concepts of democracy and capitalism and were ambitious to improve themselves economically. In February 1963, the Oswalds met Ruth Payne at a social gathering. Ruth Payne was temporarily separated from her husband and living with her 2 children in their home in Irving, Texas, a suburb of Dallas. Because of an interest in the Russian language and sympathy for Marina Oswald, who spoke no English and had little funds, Ruth Payne befriended Marina and during the next 2 months visited her on several occasions. On April 6, 1963, Oswald lost his job with a photography firm. A few days later, on April 10th, he attempted to kill Major General Edwin A. Walker, resigned U.S. Army, using a rifle which he had ordered by mail 1 month previously under an assumed name. Marina Oswald learned of her husband's act when she confronted him with a note which he had left, giving her instructions in the event he did not return. That incident and their general economic difficulties impelled Marina Oswald to suggest that her husband leave Dallas and go to New Orleans to look for work. Oswald left for New Orleans on April 24, 1963. Ruth Payne, who knew nothing of the Walker shooting, invited Marina Oswald and the baby to stay with her in the Paynes' modest home while Oswald sought work in New Orleans. Early in May, upon receiving word from Oswald that he had found a job, Ruth Payne drove Marina Oswald and the baby to New Orleans to rejoin Oswald. During the stay in New Orleans, Oswald formed a fictitious New Orleans chapter of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. He posed as secretary of this organization and represented that the president was A.J. Heidel. In reality, Heidel was a completely fictitious person created by Oswald, the organization's only member. Oswald was arrested on August 9th in connection with a scuffle which occurred while he was distributing pro-Castro leaflets. The next day, while at the police station, he was interviewed by an FBI agent after Oswald requested the police to arrange such an interview. Oswald gave the agent false information about his own background and was evasive in his replies concerning fair play for Cuba activities. During the next 2 weeks, Oswald appeared on radio programs twice, claiming to be the spokesman for the Fair Play for Cuba Committee in New Orleans. On July 19, 1963, Oswald lost his job as a greaser of coffee processing machinery. In September, after an exchange of correspondence with Marina Oswald, Ruth Payne drove to New Orleans and on September 23rd transported Marina, the child, and the family belongings to Irving, Texas. Ruth Payne suggested that Marina Oswald, who was expecting her second child in October, live at the Payne house until after the baby was born. Oswald remained behind, ostensibly to find work either in Houston or some other city. Instead, he departed by bus for Mexico, arriving in Mexico City on September 27th, where he promptly visited the Cuban and Russian embassies. His stated objective was to obtain official permission to visit Cuba on his way to the Soviet Union. The Cuban government would not grant his visa unless the Soviet government also issue a visa permitting his entry into Russia. Oswald's effort to secure these visas failed, and he left for Dallas, where he arrived on October 3rd, 1963. When he saw his wife the next day, it was decided that Oswald would rent a room in Dallas and visit his family on weekends. For 1 week, he rented a room from Mrs. Bledsoe, the woman who later saw him on the bus shortly after the assassination. On October 14, 1963, he rented the Beckley Avenue room and listed his name as O.H. Lee. On the same day, at the suggestion of a neighbor, Mrs. Payne phoned the Texas School Book Depository and was told that there was a job opening. She informed Oswald, who was interviewed the following day at the depository and started to work there on October 16, 1963. On October 20th, the Oswald's second daughter was born. During October and November, Oswald established a general pattern of weekend visits to Irving, arriving on Friday afternoon and returning to Dallas Monday morning with a fellow employee, Buell Wesley Fraser, who lived near the Paynes. On Friday, November 15th, Oswald remained in Dallas at the suggestion of his wife, who told him that the house would be crowded because of a birthday party of Ruth Payne's daughter. On Monday, November 18th, Oswald and his wife quarreled bitterly during a telephone conversation because she learned for the first time that he was living at the rooming house under an assumed name. On Thursday, November 21st, Oswald told Fraser that he would like to drive to Irving to pick up some curtain rods for an apartment in Dallas. His wife and Mrs. Payne were quite surprised to see him, since it was a Thursday night. They thought he had returned to make up after Monday's quarrel. He was conciliatory, but Marina Oswald was still angry. Later that evening, when Mrs. Payne had finished cleaning the kitchen, she went into the garage and noticed that the lights were burning. She was certain that she had not left it on, although the incident appeared unimportant at the time. The following morning, Oswald left while his wife was still in bed. She did not see him leave the house, nor did Ruth Payne. On the dresser in the room, he left his wedding ring, which he had never done before. His wallet, containing $170, was left intact in a dresser drawer. Oswald walked to Fraser's house about a half a block away and placed a long, bulky package made out of wrapping paper and tape into the rear seat of the car. He told Fraser that the package contained curtain rods. When they reached the depository parking lot, Oswald walked quickly ahead. Fraser noticed and saw Oswald enter the depository building carrying the long, bulky package with him. During the morning of November 22nd, Marina Oswald followed President Kennedy's activities on television. She and Ruth Payne cried when they heard that the president had been shot. Ruth Payne translated the news of the shooting to Marina Oswald as it came over the television, including the report that the shots were probably fired from the building where Oswald worked. When Marina Oswald heard this, she recalled the Walker episode and the fact that her husband still owned the rifle. She went quietly to the Payne's garage, where the rifle had been concealed in a blanket, among other belongings. It appeared to her that the rifle was still there, although she did not actually open the blanket. At about 3 p.m., the police arrived at the Payne house and asked Marina Oswald whether her husband owned a rifle. She said that he did, and then led them into the garage and pointed to the rolled-up blanket. As a police officer lifted it, the blanket hung limply over either side of his arm. The rifle was not there. Meanwhile, at police headquarters, Captain Fritz had begun questioning Oswald. Soon after the start of the first interrogation, agents of the FBI and the U.S. Secret Service arrived and participated in the questioning. Oswald denied having anything to do with the assassination of President Kennedy or the murder of Patrolman Tippit. He claimed that he was eating lunch at the time of the assassination and that he then spoke with his foreman for 5 to 10 minutes before going home. He denied that he owned a rifle, and when confronted in a subsequent interview with a picture showing him holding a rifle and a pistol, he claimed that his face had been superimposed on somebody else's body. He refused to answer any questions about the presence in his wallet of a Selective Service card with his picture and the name Alec J. Heidel. During the questioning of Oswald on the 3rd floor of the police department, more than 100 representatives of the press, radio, and television were crowded into the hallway through which Oswald had to pass and being taken from his cell to Captain Fritz's office for interrogation. Reporters tried to interview Oswald during these trips. Between Friday afternoon and Sunday morning, he appeared in the hallway at least 16 times. The generally confused conditions outside and inside Captain Fritz's office increased the difficulty of police questioning. Advised by the police that he could communicate with an attorney, Oswald made several telephone calls on Saturday in an effort to procure representation of his own choice and discussed the matter with the president of the local bar association, who offered to obtain counsel. Oswald declined the offer, saying that he would first try to obtain counsel by himself. By Sunday morning, he had not yet engaged an attorney. At 7:10 p.m. on November 22, 1963, Lee Harvey Oswald was formally advised that he had been charged with the murder of Patrolman J.D. Tippit. Several witnesses to the Tippit slaying and to the subsequent flight of the gunman had positively identified Oswald in police lineups. While positive firearm identification evidence was not available at the time, the revolver in Oswald's possession at the time of his arrest was of a type which could have fired the shots that killed Tippit. The formal charge against Oswald for the assassination of President Kennedy was lodged shortly after 1:30 a.m. on Saturday, November 23rd. By 10 p.m. of the day of the assassination, the FBI had traced the rifle found on the 6th floor of the school book depository to a mail order house in Chicago, which had purchased it from a distributor in New York. Approximately 6 hours later, the Chicago firm advised that this rifle had been ordered in March 1963 by an A. Heidel for shipment to a post office box 2915 in Dallas, Texas, a box rented by Oswald. Payment for the rifle was remitted by a money order signed by A. Heidel. By 6:45 p.m. on November 23rd, the FBI was able to advise the Dallas police that, as a result of handwriting analysis on the documents used to purchase the rifle, it had concluded that the rifle had been ordered by Lee Harvey Oswald. Throughout Friday and Saturday, the Dallas police released to the public many of the details concerning the alleged evidence against Oswald. Police officials discussed important aspects of the case, usually in the course of impromptu and confused press conferences in the third-floor corridor. Some of the information divulged was erroneous. Efforts by the news media representatives to reconstruct the crime and promptly report details frequently led to erroneous and often conflicting reports. At the urgings of the newsmen, Chief of Police Jesse E. Curry brought Oswald to a press conference in the police assembly room shortly after midnight of the day Oswald was arrested. The assembly room was crowded with newsmen who had come to Dallas from all over the country. They shouted questions at Oswald and flashed cameras at him. Among this group was a 52-year-old Dallas nightclub operator, Jack Ruby. On Sunday morning, November 24th, arrangements were made for Oswald's transfer from the city jail to the Dallas County Jail, about 1 mile away. The news media had been informed on Saturday night that the transfer of Oswald would not take place until after 10 a.m. on Sunday. Earlier on Sunday, between 2:30 and 3 a.m., anonymous telephone calls threatening Oswald's life had been received by the Dallas office of the FBI and by the office of the county sheriff. Nevertheless, on Sunday morning, television, radio, and newspaper representatives crowded into the basement to record the transfer. As reviewed through television cameras, Oswald would emerge from a door in front of the cameras and proceed to the transfer vehicle. To the right of the cameras was a down ramp from Main Street on the north. To the left was an up ramp leading to Commerce Street on the south. The armored truck which Oswald was to be transferred arrived shortly after 11 a.m. Police officials then decided, however, that an unmarked police car would be preferable for the trip because of its greater speed and maneuverability. At approximately 11:20 a.m., Oswald emerged from the basement jail office, flanked by detectives on either side and at his rear. He took a few steps towards the car and was in the glaring light of the television cameras when a man suddenly darted out from an area on the right of the cameras where newsmen had been assembled. The man was carrying a Colt .38 revolver in his right hand, and while millions watched on television, he moved quickly to within a few feet of Oswald and fired one shot into Oswald's abdomen. Oswald groaned with pain as he fell to the ground and quickly lost consciousness. Within 7 minutes, Oswald was at Parkland Hospital where, without having regained consciousness, he was pronounced dead at 1:07 p.m. The man who killed Oswald was Jack Ruby. He was instantly arrested and minutes later confined in a cell on the 5th floor of the Dallas police jail. Under interrogation, he denied that the killing of Oswald was in any way connected with the conspiracy involving the assassination of President Kennedy. He maintained that he had killed Oswald in a temporary fit of depression and rage over the president's death. Ruby was transferred the following day to the county jail without notice to the press or to police officers not directly involved in the transfer. Indicted for the murder of Oswald by the state of Texas on November 26, 1963, Ruby was found guilty on March 14, 1964, and sentenced to death. As of September 1964, his case was pending on appeal. Conclusions. This commission was created to ascertain the facts relating to the preceding summary of events and to consider the important questions which they raised. The commission has addressed itself to this task and has reached certain conclusions based on all the available evidence. No limitations have been placed on the commission's inquiry. It has conducted its own investigation, and all government agencies have fully discharged their responsibility to cooperate with the commission in its investigation. These conclusions represent the reasoned judgment of all members of the commission and are presented after an investigation which has satisfied the commission that it's ascertained the truth concerning the assassination of President Kennedy to the extent that a prolonged and thorough search makes this possible. Number 1. The shots which killed President Kennedy and wounded Governor Colony were fired from the 6th floor window at the southeast corner of the Texas Schoolbook Depository. This determination is based on the following. A. Witnesses at the scene of the assassination saw a rifle being fired from the 6th floor window of the depository building, and some witnesses saw a rifle in the window immediately after the shots were fired. B. The nearly whole bullet found on Governor Colony's stretcher at Parkland Memorial Hospital, and the 2 bullet fragments found in the front seat of the presidential limousine were fired from a 6.5mm Mannlicher Carcano rifle found on the 6th floor of the depository building to the exclusion of all other weapons. C. The 3 used cartridge cases found near the window on the 6th floor at the southeast corner of the building were fired from the same rifle which fired the above-described bullet and fragments to the exclusion of all other weapons. D. The windshield in the presidential limousine was struck by a bullet fragment on the inside surface of the glass, but was not penetrated. E. The nature of the bullet wounds suffered by President Kennedy and Governor Colony and the location of the car at the time of the shots establish that the bullets were fired from above and behind the presidential limousine, striking the president and the governor as follows. 1. President Kennedy was struck by a bullet which entered at the back of his neck and exited through the lower front portion of his neck, causing a wound which would not necessarily have been lethal. The president was struck a second time by a bullet which entered the right rear portion of his head, causing a massive and fatal wound. 2. Governor Connolly was struck by a bullet which entered on the right side of his back and traveled downward through the right side of his chest, exiting below his right nipple. This bullet then passed through his right wrist and entered his left thigh, where it caused a superficial wound. F. There is no credible evidence that the shots were fired from the triple underpass ahead of the motorcade or from any other location. 2. The weight of the evidence indicates that there were 3 shots fired. 3. Although it is not necessary to any essential findings of the Commission to determine just which shot hit Governor Colony, there is very persuasive evidence from the experts to indicate that the same bullet which pierced the President's throat also caused Governor Colony's wounds. However, Governor Colony's testimony and certain other factors have given rise to some difference of opinion as to this probability, but there is no question in the mind of any member of the Commission that all the shots which caused the President's and Governor Colony's wounds were fired from the 6th floor window of the Texas Schoolbook Depository. 4. The shots which killed President Kennedy and wounded Governor Colony were fired by Lee Harvey Oswald. This conclusion is based upon the following. A. The Mannlicher Carcano 6.5mm Italian rifle from which the shots were fired was owned by and the possession of Oswald. B. Oswald carried this rifle into the depository building on the morning of November 22, 1963. C. Oswald, at the time of the assassination, was present at the window from which the shots were fired. D. Shortly after the assassination, the rifle belonging to Oswald was found partially hidden between some cartons on the 6th floor, and the improvised paper bag in which Oswald brought the rifle to the depository was found close by the window from which the shots were fired. E. Based on testimony of the experts and their analysis of films of the assassination, the Commission has concluded that a rifleman of Lee Harvey Oswald's capabilities could have fired the shots from the rifle used in the assassination within the elapsed time of the shooting. The Commission has concluded further that Oswald possessed the capability with a rifle which enabled him to commit the assassination. F. Oswald lied to the police after his arrest concerning important matters. G. Oswald had attempted to kill Major General Edwin A. Walker, resigned U.S. Army, on April 10, 1963, thereby demonstrating his disposition to take human life. 5. Oswald killed Dallas Police Patrolman J.D. Tippit approximately 45 minutes after the assassination. This conclusion upholds the finding that Oswald fired the shots which killed President Kennedy and wounded Governor Colony, and is supported by the following. A. 2 eyewitnesses saw the Tippit shooting, and 7 eyewitnesses heard the shots and saw the gunman leave the scene with revolver in hand. These 9 eyewitnesses positively identify Lee Harvey Oswald as the man they saw. B. The cartridge cases found at the scene of the shooting were fired from the revolver in the possession of Oswald at the time of his arrest, to the exclusion of all other weapons. C. The revolver in Oswald's possession at the time of his arrest was purchased by and belonged to Oswald. D. Oswald's jacket was found along the path of flight taken by the gunman as he fled from the scene of the killing. 6. Within 80 minutes of the assassination and 35 minutes of the Tippit killing, Oswald resisted arrest at the theater by attempting to shoot another Dallas police officer. 7. The Commission has reached the following conclusions concerning Oswald's interrogation and detention by the Dallas police. A. Except for the force required to effect his arrest, Oswald was not subjected to any physical coercion by any law enforcement officials. He was advised that he could not be compelled to give any information, and that any statements made by him might be used against him in court. He was advised of his right to counsel. He was given the opportunity to obtain counsel of his own choice, and was offered legal assistance by the Dallas Bar Association, which he rejected at the time. B. Newspaper, radio, and television reporters were allowed uninhibited access to the area through which Oswald had to pass when he was moved from his cell to the interrogation room and other sections of the building, thereby subjecting Oswald to harassment and creating chaotic conditions which were not conducive to orderly interrogation or the protection of the rights of the prisoner. C. The numerous statements, sometimes erroneous, made to the press by various local law enforcement officials during this period of confusion and disorder in the police station would have presented serious obstacles to the obtaining of a fair trial for Oswald. To the extent that the information was erroneous or misleading, it helped to create doubts, speculation, and fears in the mind of the public, which might otherwise not have arisen. 8. The Commission has reached the following conclusions concerning the killing of Oswald by Jack Ruby on November 24, 1963. A. Ruby entered the basement of the Dallas Police Department shortly after 11:17 a.m. and killed Lee Harvey Oswald at 11:21 a.m. B. Although the evidence on Ruby's means of entry is not conclusive, the weight of the evidence indicates that he walked down the ramp leading from Main Street to the basement of the police department. C. There's no evidence to support the rumor that Ruby may have been assisted by any members of the Dallas Police Department in the killing of Oswald. D. The Dallas Police Department's decision to transfer Oswald to the county jail in full public view was unsound. The arrangements made by the police department on Sunday morning, only a few hours before the attempted transfer, were inadequate. Of critical importance was the fact that news media representatives and others were not excluded from the basement, even after the police were notified of threats to Oswald's life. These deficiencies contributed to the death of Lee Harvey Oswald. 9. The Commission has found no evidence that either Lee Harvey Oswald or Jack Ruby was part of any conspiracy, domestic or foreign, to assassinate President Kennedy. The reasons for this conclusion are: A. The Commission has found no evidence that anyone assisted Oswald in planning or carrying out the assassination. In this connection, it has thoroughly investigated, among other factors, the circumstances surrounding the planning of the motorcade route through Dallas, the hiring of Oswald by the Texas School Book Depository Company on October 15, 1963, the method by which the rifle was brought into the building, the placing of cartons and books at the window, Oswald's escape from the building, and the testimony of eyewitnesses to the shooting. B. The Commission has found no evidence that Oswald was involved with any person or group in a conspiracy to assassinate the President, although it has thoroughly investigated, in addition to other possible leads, all facets of Oswald's associations, finances, and personal habits, particularly during the period following his return from the Soviet Union in June 1962. C. The Commission has found no evidence to show that Oswald was employed, persuaded, or encouraged by any foreign government to assassinate President Kennedy, or that he was an agent of any foreign government, although the Commission has reviewed the circumstances surrounding Oswald's defection to the Soviet Union, his life there from October of 1959 to June of 1962 so far as it can be reconstructed, his known contacts with the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, and his visits to the Cuban and Soviet embassies in Mexico City during his trip from Mexico from September 26 to October 3, 1963, and his known contacts with the Soviet embassy in the United States. D. The Commission has explored all attempts of Oswald to identify himself with various political groups, including the Communist Party USA, the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, and the Socialist Workers' Party, and has been unable to find any evidence that the contacts which he initiated were related to Oswald's subsequent assassination of the President. E. All of the evidence before the Commission established that there was nothing to support the speculation that Oswald was an agent, employee, or informant of the FBI, the CIA, or any other governmental agency. It has thoroughly investigated Oswald's relationships prior to the assassination with all agencies of the U.S. government. All contacts with Oswald by any of these agencies were made in the regular exercise of their different responsibilities. F. No direct or indirect relationship between Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby has been discovered by the Commission, nor has it been able to find any credible evidence that either knew the other, although a thorough investigation was made of the many rumors and speculations of such a relationship. G. The Commission has found no evidence that Jack Ruby acted with any other person in the killing of Lee Harvey Oswald. H. After careful investigation, the Commission has found no credible evidence that Ruby and Officer Tippit, who was killed by Oswald, knew each other, or that Oswald and Tippit knew each other. 10. In its entire investigation, the Commission has found no evidence of conspiracy, subversion, or disloyalty to the U.S. government by any federal, state, or local official. 11. On the basis of the evidence before the Commission, it concludes that Oswald acted alone. Therefore, to determine the motives for the assassination of President Kennedy, one must look at the assassin himself. Clues to Oswald's motives can be found in his family history, his education, or lack of it, his acts, his writings, and the recollections of those who had close contacts with him throughout his life. The Commission has presented with this report all of the background information bearing on motivation which it could discover. Thus, others may study Lee Oswald's life and arrive at their own conclusions as to his possible motives. The Commission did not make any definitive determination of Oswald's motives. It has endeavored to isolate factors which contributed to his character and which might have influenced his decision to assassinate President Kennedy. These factors were: A. His deep-rooted resentment of all authority, which is expressed as a hostility towards every society in which he lived. B. his inability to enter into meaningful relationships with people, and a continuous pattern of rejecting his environment in favor of new surroundings. C. His urge to try to find a place in history, and despair at times over failures in his various undertakings. D. His capacity for violence, as evidenced by his attempt to kill General Walker. E. His avowed commitment to Marxism and communism, as he understood the terms and developed his own interpretation of them. This was expressed by his antagonism towards the United States, by his defection to the Soviet Union, by his failure to be reconciled with life in the United States even after his disenchantment with the Soviet Union, and by his efforts, though frustrated, to go to Cuba. Each of these contributed to his capacity to risk all in cruel and irresponsible actions. 12. The Commission recognizes that the varied responsibilities of the President require that he make frequent trips to all parts of the United States and abroad. Consistent with their high responsibilities, presidents can never be protected from every potential threat. The Secret Service difficulty in meeting its protective responsibility varies with the activities and the nature of the occupant of the office of the President and his willingness to conform to plans for his safety. In appraising the performance of the Secret Service, it should be understood that it has to do its work within such limitations. Nevertheless, the Commission believes that recommendations for improvements in the presidential protection are compelled by the facts disclosed in this investigation. A. The complexities of the presidency have increased so rapidly in recent years that the Secret Service has not been able to develop or to secure adequate resources of personnel and facilities to fulfill its important assignment. This situation should be promptly remedied. B. The Commission has concluded that the criteria and procedures of the Secret Service designed to identify and protect against persons considered threats to the President were not adequate prior to the assassination. 1. The Protective Research Section of the Secret Service, which is responsible for its preventive work, lacked sufficient training personnel and the mechanical and technical assistance needed to fulfill its responsibility. 2. Prior to the assassination, the Secret Service criteria dealt with direct threats against the President. Although the Secret Service treated the direct threats against the President adequately, it failed to recognize the necessity of identifying other potential sources of danger to his security. The Secret Service did not develop adequate and specific criteria defining those persons or groups who might present a danger to the President. In effect, the Secret Service largely relied upon other federal or state agencies to supply the information necessary for it to fulfill its preventative responsibilities, although it did ask for information about direct threats to the President. C. The Commission has concluded that there was insufficient liaison and coordination of information between the Secret Service and other federal agencies necessarily concerned with presidential protection. Although the FBI, in the normal exercise of its responsibility, had secured considerable information about Lee Harvey Oswald, it had no official responsibility under the Secret Service criteria existing at the time of the President's trip to Dallas to refer to the Secret Service the information it had about Oswald. The Commission has concluded, however, that the FBI took an unduly restrictive view of its role in preventive intelligence work prior to the assassination. A more careful coordinated treatment of the Oswald case by the FBI might well have resulted in bringing Oswald's activities to the attention of the Secret Service. D. The Commission has concluded that some of the advanced preparations in Dallas made by the Secret Service, such as the detailed security measures taken at Love Field and the Trade Mart, were thorough and well executed. In other respects, however, the Commission has concluded that the advanced preparations for the President's trip were deficient. 1. Although the Secret Service is compelled to rely to a great extent on local law enforcement officials, its procedures at the time of the Dallas trip did not call for well-defined instructions as to the respective responsibilities of the police officials and others assisting in the protection of the President. 2. The procedures relied upon by the Secret Service for detecting the presence of an assassin located in the building along a motorcade route were inadequate. At the time of the trip to Dallas, the Secret Service, as a matter of practice, did not investigate or cause to be checked any building located along the motorcade route to be taken by the President. The responsibility for observing windows in these buildings during the motorcade was divided between local police personnel stationed on the streets to regulate crowds and Secret Service agents riding in the motorcade. Based on its investigation, the Commission has concluded that these arrangements during the trip to Dallas were clearly not sufficient. The configuration of the presidential car and the seating arrangements of the Secret Service agents in the car did not afford the Secret Service agents the opportunity they should have had to be of immediate assistance to the President at the first sign of danger. F. Within these limitations, however, the Commission finds that the agents most immediately responsible for the President's safety reacted promptly at the time the shots were fired from the Texas School Book Depository building.